And the third key here, which we briefly touched on before, description. Description is so important because this is a lot of the times we loathe descriptions. We hate reading descriptions. We can't stand descriptions because we have this memory of like, if I could read a thrilling story of pirates, why would I read this 20-paged short story just describing a piano in a dusty room, right? So that's the kind of adversarial relation that we typically have with descriptions because they're boring. They're usually about a very specific thing where the author would basically shower it with attention. But without realizing that, a lot of the times, books that are written now or books that are quite contemporary, they are okay or they can get away with not using a lot of description because they're borrowing shared imagery and shared signifiers. If someone describes to you, if someone describes to you, I'm on my phone all the time, you kind of know what that means. There's no need to describe the phone as kind of like a rectangular, alien-looking thing, unless you're writing a period romance of an ancient Greek emperor who traveled to present time and, he's combating with these impulses. He's trying to understand what a phone is. Unless you're writing a fiction or reading a fiction like that, well, it's not really necessary to describe too many things in our lives already in elaborate details. Yet, when you dive into the classics, one of the first things that you're going to realize is that, there are a lot of these descriptions of really, really different things that probably no longer exist in our worlds. And also, some descriptions also might echo some resonance in our present, right? So, for example, someone describes the rising of the smoke that came out of an incense in a church or out of a candle that's been blown out, and how that smoke rises and how it dissipates in the rays of sunlight that's shining through the church's window. That's a description that still exists today, but sometimes we simply miss it. So description's job is simply to anchor you deeper, sometimes into the narrative, but more importantly, description's there to alter your perception of how you read reality. So that when you walk away from a piece of fiction, it's not just the case that, okay, I've read this novel, it's all pretty good, the novel's really good, but when you return, or when you return into your present reality, good description should sharpen the lens, or should open up the aperture of your perception, or it should give your present reality more vividness. It should paint your current reality in a completely different light. And that is the beauty of really great descriptions. And when you read, for example, Marcel Proust, some people can't stand his work. I couldn't stand his work. It's just so long, 50 pages describing one thing. But as I've gotten older, I started to appreciate that maybe that's what the juice of life is all about. Maybe the juice of life is to learn to have this sharpened attention to our present reality that otherwise looks very mundane. So description, on the one hand, anchors us deeper into our present reality. And on the other hand, like I said before at the beginning of this workshop, it could transport us into a completely different world with completely different technologies, with completely different narratives, and into certain really bizarre territories. If you ever get into like 20th century, especially post-war literature, some of these descriptions will have you questioning the structure of reality. And some of these descriptions can give you a completely different way of even viewing your present reality. And I think that's the key here. The key description here is really the root of escapism. Right, so a lot of people read fiction sometimes even to escape. And descriptions here is your express train ride into a different world. And if you really learn to appreciate it in detail, if you train up the stamina for it, and a rule of thumb here is whenever you see a big wall of descriptions, don't discount it. Try to really look up all the words. Try to really get into this flowery wall of descriptions. Don't view it as superfluous. View it as a device that will anchor you deeper into your present reality, and view it as something that could really transport you into a different world. And this is a sort of the thing when you run out of things to describe things. Yeah, does that ever happen in your conversations? Sometimes you think to yourself, I really want to describe the feeling of jealousy. Jealousy has a very, very distinct quality about it, right? You see your favorite, a girl that you have a crush on, dancing with some handsome guy who's 6'3", wearing a suit on the other end of the ballroom, and you think to yourself, I can't describe it. How do I describe this? And here's how James Joyce described jealousy beautifully in this one line here. A warm shock of air heat of mustard hinged on Mr. Bloom's heart. So just appreciate that description for 1 second. You know, who came up with this imagery of jealousy being a mustard heat in your chest? You know, that is so accurate, and that's what great descriptions could do to your surroundings. It can label your surroundings. It could, brighten up your perception of your current reality, and at the same time, descriptions will transport you into a completely different reality and into a completely different way of viewing the world. So don't skip descriptions. Use descriptions to retrain your perception of reality, both in the novel and outside in your everyday presence or in your everyday reality. So for descriptions, I really just have to use a series of examples to really get you to look at how amazing descriptions are and how much of an effect they can have on you. So, like we read before, there's a description of jealousy in Ulysses. Quote, "A warm shock of air heat of mustard hinged on Mr. Bloom's heart," unquote. So accurate. Jealousy really does feel like that mustard heating your chest, right? And a second one here comes from Flaubert's Sentimental Education, where he says, quote, "At the back of the deserted cafes, women behind the bars yawned between their untouched bottles. The newspapers lay unopened on the reading room tables. In the laundress's workshops, the washing quivered in a warm drafts," unquote. So that's a really important excerpt because Flaubert has this amazing ability to paint a scene, right? So a lot of the times people read Flaubert and they think, why is he describing all this useless stuff? Without realizing that is kind of how we look at reality. We are at the same time paying attention and not paying attention. When you walk past the intersection, you're not paying attention to I don't know, this guy in a suit, holding a bouquet of flowers, right? You're not really paying attention to that. Maybe you're thinking, just pay attention to the green little man. I have to cross the street. Better not turn right before I reach the other end of the street because I'm going to get run over by a car, something like that. So all this stuff in Flaubert's fictions rendered in vivid detail, all these superfluous little things, they're there as padding for you to exist in Flaubert's fictional universe. Because describing useless things or describing trivial things is how you make a world believable. A lot of the times when people try to write fiction for the first time, me included, they tend to just describe unnecessary things with too much detail and without realizing that world building is all about lavishing attention on key, settings or key devices that's going to really build a scene. So, for example, the way that you would describe the room that I'm looking at right now, it doesn't make much sense for me to describe the mechanics of my camera, but it does make sense if I want to establish the atmosphere of this room to describe the calligraphy here on a wall, how there's a skull up there, how there's a record player in the background, to paint a sort of semantic web, right? That indicates that, this person who's sitting here recording this video is a kind of person. So that's what Flaubert is doing. He hand selects these trivial details and plugs you into a world to give you a specific feeling. And as you are reading through these descriptions, wonder, why is it the case that he chose, I don't know, deserted cafes, women behind the bars and untouched bottles and, the washing from the laundry and a warm draft. Why does he shower such detail on such trivial things? And the answer is he's trying to build a world for you. And realism comes from seemingly trivial things that makes up a web of a different world, touch points for a fictional world to come alive. So that's how you should treat descriptions. Always wonder why. Or, why is it the case that the author allowed this description to come in and not another one? And in the cases where you read some challenging fiction or fiction that's simply not that good, 9 out of 10 times, if a piece of description sounds just so silly to you, they're lavishing their attention on the wrong things. They're paying too much attention to the trivial and not enough attention to elements that will really set up a scene. So that's how you treat descriptions. And perhaps that's going to lead me to one of my favorite excerpts from James Baldwin in his novel Another Country, which is describing his memory of this woman, or I think memory of this jazz musician, of this woman that he used to love, or that he still loves. I'm not going to spoil the story, but there's this woman, there's this jazz musician, and this jazz musician is recalling, what this woman was like and the kind of feelings that it conjures up. So, quote, For to remember Leona was also somehow to remember the eyes of his mother, the rage of his father, the beauty of his sister. It was to remember the streets of Harlem, the boys on the stoops, the girls behind the stairs and on the roofs, the white policeman who had taught him how to hate, the stickball games in the streets, the women leaning out of windows, and the numbers they played daily, hoping for the hit his father never made. And he had fled, so he had thought, from the beat of Harlem, which is simply the beat of his own heart, into a boot camp in the South and onto the pounding sea. Unquote. So James Baldwin had every opportunity to simply say, this man remembered a woman who he used to love, you know? But with that description, with the padding, with reminding, with tapping into how human memories really work, you don't just remember a girl who you used to love. You don't just remember someone who you used to date, but it comes with a string of remembrances. It's the first touch on the back of the hand. It's the first kiss. It's the first time she sat on your lap. It's the first time where, sometimes the first blowout that you guys had, the first drink that you guys had, or the first connection where you started to spot the sparks in her eyes. It's all these associated imageries. And this description right here painted the feeling that this character had for this woman so clearly that you can't help but to be moved, right? And how is it so hard for him to even, leave Harlem to go to the South? It was really challenging, but it's also the case that he was leaving home. So all these considerations started bubbling up, and this is what great descriptions do. They reveal that there's more to the mundane than meets the eye. There's more to every little moment that we have, and it builds up this appreciation for everything that's around us. And if you learn to appreciate it and not skip a description just because it seems a little bit superfluous, if you tap into a line of descriptions, what you'll find is a sea of different feelings and sensations that the author had intended for you to feel. And that, in a sense, builds an entirely different world from the world that you're familiar with, and it enhances the world that you already live in. And that is the magic of descriptions.